Hello, hello, hello. Are we live? We're live. Yay, it worked. Technology's the best. Hello, everybody. Welcome to AngularAir. My name is Alyssa Nichol, and today with me, I have two amazing panelists and one beautiful and brilliant guest. So let's get to it. I'm super pumped. We've got Mike, who is at the top. Nope, always mess it up. Hey, say hi, Mike.
I'm
say
right
hi.
next to you.
I know.
Happy Friday.
Oh, it is. It is Friday. That's always the good. That's always the good thing. Angular, like, it grounds you. You know, it lets you know what day it is, in case you're like me and just have absolutely no concept of time. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And we also have Shorty. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, I'm so happy you guys are here with me today. It's been a hot minute. I apologies for like falling off the face of the earth. I had a lot of travel, so but it's good to be back. And then we have Q with us. I'm going to do the diagonal. Oh, are you still proud? Are you still proud?
Oh, it's over here. It's not mirrored. Okay.
Q, can you introduce yourself to the audience for those of you who don't know you, and maybe tell us what we're talking about today?
Yeah, I'm Q. I am a architect at JB Hunt, which is a transportation company out of Arkansas. I've been doing Angular development for almost a decade now. I've started with AngularJS, and I've been around for every major release in Angular. I'm also a Cypress ambassador, so I'm really big into testing, especially component integration tests and accessibility. Those are my two favorite things about development.
Nice. And so today we're going to dive into one of your favorite things.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about our subject matter?
For sure. So component testing has been around for a long time. It's not a new concept at all. But Cypress just released in their GA in version 11 of Cypress component testing full support in Angular. So we no longer have to use Jasmine or Jest or Testbed in general to component test our components. And it gives us a lot cleaner syntax for those who have used Cypress in the past and know exactly how sci.get or just the general Cypress context works. It's a lot more streamlined, a lot easier to pick up.
So I want you all to know, I think today should be all about confessions. So prep yourselves mentally for that.
I don't know if I signed up for that. Okay.
Oh, no. Oh, you did. You're here.
I did. I'm here.
I delete all test files as they're generated, and personally have never gotten behind the you should test things train. So just know.
What does that even mean? You don't test things.
I want you all to know. I want the world to know.
Wait, because hold on, stop. That's not just I'm not going to test things. That says anybody else in this project is not allowed to test things.
Exactly.
Either. It does. I know. Because it kind of clutters my brain, because I'm like, what is this? We're not using tests. Any project that I've ever worked on did not use tests. And I know Shai is literally rolling over right now.
Yeah, so
he's sleeping in Israel and he's dying.
You hosted NGConf with like the test guy.
I am not saying testing is bad. I'm saying I was never sold to get on that train, because I'm like a front end girl, right? And like testing my front end, I'm like, yeah, buttons pixel perfect, let's go, right? So for me, I just really I want you to sell it today, like hard and basic, so that like I can get on this train, because I've always wanted to get on the train. But I always look at it when people, even Shai, he'll show me testing and I'm like, that looks like a lot of work, man. Like a lot of work. And there's times where my husband has leaned over and gone, you know what would have helped you, when I'm like, down this bug rabbit hole. And he's like, and I go, test, and he goes, test.
Covered.
So yeah. I know there is wisdom in it. I just want you to know that you gotta really this was where personally, Mike, Justin, I'm assuming you use tests in your everyday lives and you love it and you're all about it and you're like, yes, we must, right? I'm assuming you're like, duh.
Yeah.
Are you test first or do you test after?
I'd like to say I'm test first, but I'm definitely test after.
Test after, okay. Your face.
I'll make a confession. I selectively test. Okay. I do not just opt in to test all the things, test coverage like with the generators and stuff. I like to kind of focus on where there's going to be value in tests, because there's always like a cost to maintain those tests, and depending also how your architecture is, how easy it is to test things. So
that's the important part.
Yeah. So
But
I don't test all the things. I don't.
You test. We're not asking if you test everything.
Yes.
You right.
If I have one test, does that count as I test?
Yeah, like
Technically, yes. You're ahead of Alyssa.
yes, but yeah,
I do.
What you got?
I did do a lot of end-to-end like testing. Cypress, like I really love Cypress, so it's exciting to talk about this topic today, because you can get a lot of good, I feel good quality testing and information through that point, right? And then you can dive deeper into unit testing and stuff, more fine-grained, logic that you really want to cover that's nobody's going to break. So,
All right,
Awesome.
well, we can go then. Let's go.
Let's
talk
do it.
about it.
Oh, and also we should probably give a nod because something big happened in our community.
This is not the time for picks.
It's not a pick. It's a life-altering event for our community. We're in V15, guys. V15 dropped.
V15.
Yeah, V15 did drop.
Yeah.
I have not used it yet, but I'm looking forward to.
No, well, all right. Show us the ways of Cypress. I'm excited. I'm ready, Q.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
All right, let me share. And I do want to start out by saying that you did make me want to harken back to an old time when I first started developing front-end development, and it was QUnit, right? We had QUnit for that's where I started writing tests. And I mean, I don't want to say I loved it, but it was something different. And it was
was that like AngularJS days or not that old?
This was AngularJS days.
Okay.
And I think at some point we got Protractor, and it was awesome to me. I thought it was the coolest thing to see. This tool can crawl my page, and it can test these divs for me, and it's just the cool. The BAs can look at this and say they love it. For a long time we didn't have that anymore. Protractor kind of got clunky, and QEs or QAs used it. The devs didn't have to go through it. I don't have to spend time with that. I can just write my code, my unit tests. But yeah, I want to take us back and make Angular testing great again. I think we can do that. So let's do it. Let me start out by saying that, I mean, you already said it, that devs don't like testing, right? It's a weird concept, especially using test bed. I think that's typically the killer feature that a lot of people just don't want to get behind. It's clunky, it's long, it's verbose, it looks like a lot of boilerplate. Many people, I feel, jumped off the Jasmine and Karma train around 2018, just dropped, and it was like, hey, I don't use test bed anyway. I can just new up a component or new up a class and test my functionality. I think we all can agree here that for the most part, we shouldn't even need to unit test in terms of functionality our components, right? Like by design, our components shouldn't even have the functionality included in it. So I think Angular kind of gave us a tip early on, saying when I spin up a new component, it is going to have this fixture in it, and it's just going to say component should exist, right? That's what I'm testing. I'm testing that my component actually renders on a page. I don't need to then test any type of functionality, and I just need to test the element itself, this component's element. I think a lot of people bypassed all that. I'm going to delete this file because I don't care that the component exists, and instead I'm going to just look at it and it does what I want it to do. The button's pixel perfect, right? Like you said. So let's define what component testing is. And I felt like a Picasso when I made this. I was like, man, look at my skills here. I'm going to go ham, and I'm going to modify the traditional testing pyramid.
God, I love that so much.
I think this pyramid, not this pyramid, not mine, but the pyramid itself has been around for a long time. And I just went ahead and threw components in there because that's exactly where it falls. It needs to fall somewhere between unit tests and integration tests. When I'm doing unit tests, I want to test that my business logic returns or performs exactly how I want it to perform. It needs to be testing the functionality. I don't want to say functionality. It should test the methodology of my business logic, because I don't want to say functionality because it almost sounds like behavior, which would then be integration tests. Right. But for my components, I want to specifically test that what I'm expecting this container to do needs to always be that way. If I want the container to always be blue, I should be able to test that it's always blue. Generally, your functions don't define your colors of your component, or, as you said, the pixel perfectness of your components. You could do that. I could test that, but it almost seems wasted to do that in a unit test. So instead, I'm going to always test via unit testing my pipes, my directives, and my services. And my components, I'm not going to waste time doing a unit test with it. I'm going to write a component test for it. Is that all fair?
I like it.
In theory, yes. Except for my only point of contention would be that people do put their logic inside the components, and therefore those types of unit tests do need to exist.
Well, don't do that.
I agree, but we don't live in a perfect world.
You're right, but, and I'm not even like going to say that our components at my workplace are perfect. They are monoliths. They have 300 lines of component like business logic in the components. However, you can quickly look at them and say, hey, man, this could have been a different selector. Or, hey, man, this could have been in a service. Or, hey, man, this could have been an async pipe instead of subscribing to this observable and setting these properties like object-oriented programming. There's a bunch of things you can do to fix it. But going forward, let's make a promise right now. You three are going to make a promise that from now on, we're not going to put any of our business logic in components going forward.
As long as you're on board, I'm on board.
Okay.
So that back in the day, I used to do presentations and teaching on test-driven development, and I used to always like to talk about the fact that like you learn how to do tests, it pays off in other areas, right? You learn how to write code in a way that is helpful, not just for the test, but just overall, right? An ideal way. This same sort of thing, right? Like you write component testing and you will immediately see your coupling in your component, the business logic you have in there, the problems and things you might want to change that architecture. So even if you are in that situation, the benefit of doing testing is that it can reveal these things to you that you learn, not just for test coverage, but also about your architecture and how you can solve it.
Yeah. Anytime you're in a component and you're like, hey, why am I needing to call a function? Why do I need to call component dot get something, route or something? Right. We have an issue where we route from our components often for some reason. Like we have a router leak for that. Why are we passing through this function here? It's a weird concept that you can learn to just excise all that out and put it in the templates, or just add that to a service and import that.
One of the things I've been trying to talk a lot lately about components is like getting back to the thought that the whole component there is for UI, right? And it's a way to data bind in the UI. And that really at the heart of Angular is about providing a way to data bind to DOM, right? And that was the AngularJS was all about that. So we really kind of get back to kind of that mindset of going, the component exists to provide us a way to do our UI and bind data to it. And so it cares about what it does in the browser, what it does with the DOM. And that should stop there. Ideally, it should stop there, right? And like I said, everything else is about telling it what to do, right? Why you need to do something, or why you need to get this data, or how it's shaped is somewhere else. And the component just cares about what to do as it pertains to the DOM and the browser. That's its responsibility, right?
That's literally how it's defined in the docs. And we just don't do that.
We lost our way, right?
Yeah, it's like, I know it's defined there. I know it tells us this, but I'm going to do it this other way. Right. That's what everybody else does. It's a vibe, I guess. I don't know. But so we defined it. We have the definition of it. I always just get mad when someone says, hey, these are integration tests and they're not, or this is a unit test and it's not. We got to set
you get mad because they're using the wrong.
It's just because we don't set the groundwork on what we're talking about. Because people call different tests different things. But I think that what I said is right. And so it comes up a lot in interviews too. It's like, hey, tell me about your testing strategy. What's your testing strategy look like? So Alyssa, you would have failed already. I would have already.
No. I'm very straightforward. All right, you go over and you right click that test file all the way down. I'm kidding.
So yeah, I asked it all the time though. Like if you're applying for a senior role or an architect role, I expect you to have some type of testing experience. I expect it to be there. But more often than not, you hear one of three things. You probably hear more, but I hear one of three. And the first one is, I never learned how to write unit tests, or I never learned how to test at all. Or I know how to write a little bit of tests, but I don't typically write them because I'm not good at it. And I think that's probably the laziest answer that I get. And it's always an eye roll. Like, how did you never learn how to write a unit test? They're all over the place. There are guides everywhere to write a unit test. And the next one is that the business, oh, heck, I went through the wrong one. The business doesn't value my unit, or doesn't value testing. They don't want us to write tests. They take too long to write, and so we don't get any value from it. I feel like that one's probably a bigger headache than I never learned how. It's more like I know how to do it, but I just don't do it because somebody doesn't want me to do it. And I feel like if your business that you work for is telling you not to write tests, it's probably not a good business to work for. But yeah, I feel like that one's maybe worse than the first one. But the last one though is an easy one to fix. And it's it takes too much time. And that is sort of true. I think that whole test bed thing that we talked about before was kind of like a damned if you do, if you don't type thing. It takes a long time to pick up the whole fixture, debug element, query by CSS or directive, and then I'm going to grab a native element which returns an HTML element, and then I can write all my tests based off of those fixtures that I'm having to copy every single time in every single test. And it does take a minute to really get behind that. I don't want to say it's not clean. It's just it's a little more verbose than what I would like to deal with. I wouldn't want to write tests that way every day. So what if I told you all that we can fix that with one tool? We can pick up an easy thing to learn. I can teach you right now how to write an easy component test, and it will provide business value because they can look at the test and they can actually see in the DOM very cleanly what they look like. And it's super easy to pick up. I can write 3 or 4 lines to test multiple things at one time.
Oh,
yeah. So maybe I can get you on board.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited. Especially because Justin endorses it. So I'm not being taught some higgledy-piggledy business. All right.
This is a real deal.
Yeah.
You're real deal. Yeah.
He's already given us the first part of it. It was he said that it gives us integration tests and end-to-end tests, and he uses that. And those are awesome tools, and I use them often. We actually don't use component testing internally yet, like with Cypress. But all of my side projects have since Cypress 10's come out for 13 and 14 I've used, and it's been a game changer. But if you haven't heard of Cypress, what it does is it gives you now component testing. It gives you the ability to write integration tests. It gives you the ability to write end-to-end tests and API tests and performance tests. And you could even do smoke screens if you need to do that. Or smoke tests, any type of automated regression testing, whatever. There, you can even do unit tests in Cypress. There's actually a plugin for that. I've never used it. I just felt like I don't need to spin up a fixture, for a unit test. But it's doable. You can test any way you want to with Cypress. But today we're specifically going to talk about the component testing. And so let's go to work for a minute, and let's say we get a story and we need to have these basic requirements for a component. We're going to create a header. It's just a header component at the top of our page. And the root element needs to be a header. I don't think the BAs or the POs would tell you that you need to have a header in the root element, but the architect should be like, hey, we're going to have good accessibility, and good SEO stuff, and we're going to have a header. And there's going to be two main pieces of functionality. We're going to have, if the user isn't logged in, it should just say hello user. And if a user is logged in, it should say hello, whoever the user is. For this demonstration, it'll be John Doe because I'm clever, I guess. So let's assume, and don't do this at home. This is a very silly pipe. After I was making it, I was like, this is a really bad pipe. But I just wanted it for this example. I don't write code like this. So, but yeah,
you're like, trust me, it doesn't ever.
Yeah, we're gonna. There actually are unit tests for this. I did unit test it. It's just weird. I don't like that I'm taking in a user type or a string. It's just weird. I don't know. But we're going to check if it's an object. And if it is an object, we're going to display the user dot first name and user dot last name. And we are going to kind of protect that by saying the user type is what we're looking for as an argument. If it's not there, we will show first name only or last name only if the other one doesn't exist. Otherwise, we're just going to return the user object. We already have this. We're going to throw this in our component. But this is not going to be part of our component's functionality, though. That's important. So the component testing looks pretty much like this. We can do TDD. So Brocco can say he is a test first guy if he has this component type structure here. We know exactly what we want to test because it's already been defined for us. We know that we need to have a header element. We know that we need to have an H1 that has a greeting that says like hello user. And we know that if the user is not provided, it needs to tell us the first name and last name. So those are our requirements. We could get more dirty than this. Right. We could get crazy with this. We could do a background color of white. We could do font color. We could do font family.
And I think that's honestly one of the things that I so despise about testing is that it's just this ethereal, how far do you want to take it? And I'm like, I don't freaking know. It exists. That's the part where I just get a little claustrophobic because you could continue to test it into infinity of like the nitty gritty. And so do most people just say like three things and we're done? Or do they say, its existence and we're done? Or how does one,
I think the answer to that comes from it's pretty simple. I think it's
it is
what I think so, and I think you know the answer to this already. Actually, I think you already know what the answer.
Oh wait! Is it listen to your heart?
only if you sing it.
I think it's listen to your heart when it hurts, because your test is going to help your heart be healthy and not hurt. So protect yourself from that.
I see. Okay.
The whole point of automated testing is to remove things that you would manually test. So if you care about accessibility, then you want to automate. So I would then automate those things that I would normally look for. If I don't want a new dev to come in and change my H1 that I've defined here to an H2, then
oh my God, yes, that's such a smart one. Like you're protecting the sanity I'm protecting
the canon. Yeah, and so anything that I'm defining at its conception is going to be defined in my test.
I see. It's kind of almost in that vein, like a way of like leaving little breadcrumbs of like logic of like, we did this on purpose, right? Like, don't be messing with it. Like,
exactly. Okay. Now, at any point, it could suck if you're like, hey, your entire design system decides to change the font family from Times New Roman to Arial.
Right. No, and that does happen. Yeah.
Then you have to go through and make those changes. I mean, but you could define the font family as
you just put them variable. In like variables, and that would be like, okay, cool.
That makes things a little easier. But at the very least, you can define everything as you want it to be in canon right here.
So to go back to one of your eye twitch moments where people refer to things as the wrong type of testing, what makes this a component test?
Because we're test. So that's a good question. We we would say this is a component test because we're mostly testing things that are going to show up on the DOM, not how things react to us messing with it.
So component test is saying the same thing as like a visual test?
Yeah, you could say it's an automated visual test.
Okay. Yeah. I'm with you.
You could probably do other things like
so you would not test it here and be like, is the username clickable? Is it an anchor?
Right.
Does it go to the right username page?
Exactly.
You wouldn't do that here.
Those would all go in an integration test.
Okay. I'm with you. Yes.
Yeah. So this one would specifically be saying,
why do we care? Why can't they just all be in one big test blob?
You got to separate your concerns. That's a whole.
Right.
That's a whole S thing from Solid, right?
Yeah.
One of the things will be like when you go to your integration test, right, and you start testing features, right? This journey, right? Let's say your application has like 3 steps to go through a wizard, right? You want to write testing that confirms that behavior is fine, that they can go through that. And that can get complex. You're saying like they can fill out their credit card number with this value and this and this. And so when you write that test for your feature, that's complex already. If you add on top of that, these other things like I want to test accessibility for this UI piece, and I want to test that this header is there, then it's a massive thing to manage over time, right?
Exactly.
So just like you said, with separation of concerns and breaking it down, it's like you can isolate and your tests become easier because, testing, there's 2 things about it. It's like, we don't write tests to confirm that it passes that moment, right? Because it's always going to pass at the time we write it, that initial. It's all about protecting the future and change that code, right? And then that's about maintainability of that over time. And people abandon tests because it's hard to maintain that, right? So you balance, how do I keep the maintainability easy so that people are encouraged to keep these tests up to date over time?
So Justin, with exactly what you're saying, can you highlight Steve's comment? Because I think it's like honestly the same vein of he's saying, I'm newer to testing. Does it ever make sense to thoroughly test a component while building it? And then once you're dialed in, silence most of those tests going forward for that component? Like, and that kind of reminds me of like what you're saying, Justin, because you were saying it's like all about protecting the future. And I feel like if you only use it on creation, then that's not really the point of testing, right? Like, oh, Justin just answered. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
but
so
I think that goes back to Justin's point earlier of selectively testing what's important and not necessarily testing the minutia of, hey, right. I can set this property and it's bound properly. Or I always go back to the example, I'm a .NET dev, that if they had the concept of like automated properties with getters and setters, that people would write tests to say, hey, I'm getting this property. Do I get the right value? Or I'm setting it. Is it actually being set? Like at some point you have to trust the framework. Sure, you're then going to lose your this perceived notion of 100% code coverage.
Right.
But is that really necessary? Is that maintainable? Is that a useful test?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think was it Groovy that you can just click it and it makes the test for you. Just go through in Java. So I mean, I think that's exactly right. You just got to know what you're wanting to protect in the future, and what makes sense that you're protecting is what you're going to define in your files.
Do you guys ever find?
It looks here like I'm doing some TDD.
Yeah,
we talked about that while you were away.
While you were gone,
I was still listening.
Do you ever find that you change tests as things go on because you're like, oh, that really isn't our priority with this component or with this, like whatever the feature is? Is that something that you guys ever do where you're like, let's delete that test and make a different one? Like, or is that not really like you always have the, forethought to be?
Well, the right answer is no, we don't do that. But the actual answer is yes, of course.
Okay, cool.
So for example, with what we are looking at here, that should display a username and not user if username is provided, or whatever it reads, because I'm apparently illiterate. So going forward, the requirements may change to say, I don't want to see the username. Just say, hey. They don't need to see their name there. They know who they are.
Right.
But maybe we don't need to see that. So the requirements change. Right. So that test is therefore irrelevant because that functionality of the application does not exist.
But the good thing about separating our concerns now at that point is this component doesn't need to display it, but the functionality of that pipe I displayed still works exactly how it's supposed to. and we've already unit tested it, and we can use that pipe somewhere else, and we don't have to test that functionality in another spot.
I see.
So you use the U word there, unit test. Nobody refers to it as the U word, but we were talking about all the different things that Cypress covers, from end-to-end testing to integration testing to component testing. Is there a place within Cypress, I know this is getting slightly off topic, to cover a unit test? Like, does Cypress cover everything, or do I then also need to bring in my Jasmine Karma or Jess to handle my unit tests?
Yeah, I prefer the latter. You can use Cypress. There's a Cypress plugin for Angular called like Angular Unit Test or Cypress Unit Test, I think. I don't use it just because it just seems slow to me. And when Jess or Jasmine already does exactly what I need to do, I can test 4,000 tests in like 3 minutes. So, and I also like to separate my files out. Right now, these are .sci files for the component tests. So it's .sci.ts. And then the test runner by default for Angular uses that test TS file, and it grabs all the .spec files. So I can keep all those separated. And then for the integration test, they live in a Cypress folder that end in what is it? I guess they're just the normal files. I think they might be specs as well, but they're in a different directory, so you can set up a different TS config file for it. So you now have 3 separate test groups that all test different things. All right, I can go to the next portion here. So we're doing the TDD thing. I'm going to run these 3 things. Right now, they don't do anything, but if we were to write something inside, the test would look something like this. And it's actually, like I said, it's super simple to do. I don't have a before each here. You could, but this test does 2 things. It renders the component, so I don't have to do the compile components beforehand with Jasmine, and then grab a fixture and then declare on it. This is going to use JavaScript to grab the element that I'm telling it to. So I'm going to do a site.get, and it's going to grab the first header element. And then I can say it should exist and it should be visible. That's what I care about for this particular test. So the rendering for the component is as simple as just putting saw.mount header component. Super simple. And if we're doing TDD, then when I run that test, it is going to give me an error because I don't have anything in the component yet. Let's assume that I've already spun up the component with the CLI and it created the files. But right now it's just the header. It'll mount, but there is no header element inside of it. So we would have to go in, and if we're doing TDD like we are in this particular test, we will create our component, and it'll look something like this. It probably won't have lib header in it. I don't like using lib in app now that we have standalone. I just like to call it a header. Oh, but I can't call it a header, can I? Because anyway.
Shout out to standalone.
Yeah.
I mean, technically you could. Technically you could. It's just going to put it on the native header element.
Right. Yeah.
Now, do these have to be standalone?
No, they don't have to be standalone
for the component for Cypress.
Yeah, but why would you not have it standalone?
I mean, I agree, but but if it's not, like, how is like and it has dependencies, right? Because it needs to be part of an ng module. Does Cypress know how to do the?
It does.
Put like a parent ng module.
It does, and I can go over that in the next group of slides. But yeah, it's actually extremely simple. You just throw in whatever you can import whatever module that you need to import, and it will just work. It'll just work automatically.
100% of the time.
Yeah, 100% of the time it will always work.
Done.
So we've already defined that user interface that we talked about in that pipe, and we have now a template that has a header and an H1, and the H1 wouldn't work, or the header wouldn't work by itself if there's nothing inside of it because it doesn't show up. So you have to throw something in there. So we throw the H1 and we say hello. That's our template, and when we run this test, it should, or actually it will pass. You just have to trust me, but it does. And now we get green, right? It says assert that the header should exist, and it has an assert that the header is visible. And you can see it over there. I kind of cropped it a little bit, but the hello is there now. And that's the big bonus, is that I believe that if you wanted to go through and show this to a stakeholder at your company, you can say, like, look how valuable these tests are. You can actually see these tests as they're running, kind of like Storybook. But you don't have to manually do it. I can automatically do all these things for you. And I think that's a big selling point for this.
And that's because Cypress can be configured to export screenshots and videos,
Exactly.
right?
Yep. You can do all that stuff for just with a config toggle and the cypress.ts file. And then the next one, so this is where what you're kind of talking about here is if I wanted to make any modifications to it, we do have to get the next 2 tests. We need to do the user thing or do the name thing. So let's do the next 2 tests together. So if I have an H1 that has a greeting, or it needs to have an H1 that has a greeting in it. So it needs to say hello user as opposed to hello. So when I write this first test, it's going to fail because right now it only says hello. And then the other one is, well, I don't even have this component property called title yet. I should have named that name. I kind of rushed through that. But yeah, it needs to say, I'm gonna pass in a first name and last name because that's what the user object has. And once it does, it should say hello John Doe as opposed to hello user or just hello. So when I run that test, well, I guess not yet. That's how you modify input props. So if you have multiple inputs, then you would modify it in this component properties thing here. Component properties property. And so if I had several other ones or even outputs, which I will show you in the actual live code, you would just throw those in this component properties and you can actually modify them as part of your test. And again, you still have a really small test footprint. And if you wanted to do multiple tests with this same John Doe thing here, you could wrap this in another describe and block all these things together and just do it before each on the side.mount component with the component properties. So when I run these tests now, I will now get failures that says that the H1 should have text hello John Doe, but the text was hello because that's all we have in that H1 right now. But it's super easy to configure that. We changed our template. Still doing TDD. Now we want to get a success. So now we will pass in the comma title name display using that pipe. And we're going to put the input called title and we'll still use our TypeScript. And we will pass in that user variable there to initialize it. And of course, without fail, now both of our tests should pass, right? It should be super simple because now we hit both conditions. We now have a defined thing. And if we wanted to in our test, like we already did, do the component properties and modify that title, we should get a John Doe and boom, there we go. Look at that. We ran 3 tests in 83 milliseconds and it would really take like 2 minutes to write all 3 of those tests and we would have a working header. And if we wanted to get really crazy with this, like we said, we could get even crazier. We could define, or we could place a class or style on hello John Doe and write align it. If we wanted to be write align, we could test it. It is write align whenever it's rendered. We could change the color of the text. We could do whatever we wanted to. And all those things could be covered if those things are important to you in your test. But that is the slides, or that are the slides. That's the slides.
Those are? Those are.
It's going off. Those are the slides. But if you wanted to see like, can you still see you can still see my screen?
Yeah.
The test, they do run like, so you can see all 3 of them did pass. You do get, you can go through and see all these things beforehand, like what they were. One cool thing about Cypress, one of my favorite things is like if we were to go through these and do some interactions and whatnot, I wouldn't do them in a component test, but if you wanted to, you could get time traveling, which allows you to see the state before and after you interacted with an element. None of these would do that, but one of the other tests that I wanted to hit on beforehand was inside of like if you is that probably super tiny, huh?
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
could you make it larger?
Yeah, let's do
plussing or some sort of command.
Yeah, let's get on there. This component is called dashboard header or dashboard hero. Sorry, let's do a quick look at what that component looks like. Excuse the prettier errors. This component is just going to be a button. Essentially, is going to have a click. I'm not a fan of outputs. I believe in outputless development, so that's a thing. But I had to do it for the example. And you can
That's a hot take right there.
I
I need to hear why.
That's a whole episode.
Yeah, that'll be an episode you guys can bring me back for in the future.
Perfect, love it.
But yeah, just for the example, we have this this event emitter that's going to emit the hero that you're clicking. So each hero exists. This one, the test that I have for this one is Flash. So you can see the mock hero ID 42 and the name is Flash. If I wanted to not actually emit an actual event, I can auto spy all my outputs on that component. So I don't have to do any cool spy objects or spies. I can just say, hey, Cypress, just any output that's on this component, just stub that guy off, just right off the bat, and it'll do it for you. Or you can get very verbose, and I kind of wrote this here. I can post this the repo to this project in the chat. But you can stub them. You can actually do like create an output spy, which kind of looks like create a spy object. It takes a generic of the type of whatever is going to typically go in there. And then you can name it whatever you want. So if I wanted to name this like foo spy or something, instead of, by default, it'll do like hero, the name of the selected. So it'll be just selected spy for that, because that's what this is. The output's name is selected. So it'll just append spy at the end of whatever your variable name is by default. But you can name it whatever you want to. But I just like to do the good old auto spy. And if I needed to test that the click actually works, but that goes back to what Bronco said, I just trust that Angular is going to emit. Why would it just not work all of a sudden? But it could. There could be something wrong with something in the file, and I know for a fact anytime that this button's clicked, it's going to emit whatever that hero is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this gets a little. Oh, go ahead.
It might be that, like you said, the click, we don't really care about the click. It's going to work framework,
right?
But the data that gets passed through that event, right, is responsibility of the component doing that. So if the component has bad logic to map the data down before it sends it back through there, we may care about that in some degree, right?
Mm-hmm. I just wouldn't use an output, but yes, yeah, that is a thing.
If you are using output, then you maybe want to test that. Maybe
if you are the 99% of developers who have output,
99, you think it's that high? Wow.
Good Lord, I've never heard this before. I need to have you on for this episode.
So Chiptune is right on. He or she has said, I have a terrible secret, only test services. I mean, I thought she was
one step above the Alyssa. So you should feel great. Like
yeah. All right. Well, yeah, that's what y'all have any questions for me though? That is the framework. I was gonna just say, like, if you needed to
Mike, what's your question?
There, then,
Mike's got a question.
I wasn't gonna interrupt. I was fine to wait.
Oh, I didn't interrupt. I don't interrupt.
No, Mike. I want the question.
So this all looks great. The idea of quick setup and being able to access things quickly is great. My concern are inside the should on line 37 there is some very DSL specific, domain specific language specific stuff for accessing and validating using strings. Is there any validation or any type of proofing done on those strings? Or if I were to type have with 2 V's or something like that, is there any type of validation there? Or is there really good documentation to be able to ensure and help me as I'm writing those things? Or is it
spoken
hey,
like
this is one of the learning
guy,
huh?
Where's my IntelliSense, right?
What?
That's a very .NET thing if I've ever heard it. That's awesome.
Well, it's also it's a TypeScript thing. TypeScript thing.
Which is a .NET thing.
Yeah. Just embrace the strings, Bronco.
No, that's fine. I'm okay with it being a string, but
yeah.
I'm looking for the help there to be able to learn that, to know what's available to me. Or I mean, even if your answer is, hey, there's really good docs about it, go look at this and get up to speed using that. That's a valid answer, and that's a way to be able to understand what I have at my fingertips.
Yeah, I'm actually a big advocate of enums, and I would do that for sure. But there are a lot of documents. This is all like chai selectors. So if you ever used chai for testing, this is what that's based off of. And so they have a bunch of have beens or have what is the other one? It should have text or have property this or have color this, and they're all strings and they're all just chainers. There are different types there. You have like have or should or contains, and it changes the strictness of the assertion. This have been called with would be pretty much what you would see from the function from Jasmine, where you're doing a dot have been called or should have been called with, whatever. But yeah, these are strings. That's just the whole behavior. The behavior testing patterns are all string based from Chai.
Okay. So I've been crushing really hard on Cypress for a long time, and as you get into it, you'll see like this is one of those things that their framework is just dialed in. Like I think if you delete that out right now and start typing, it'll give you suggestions.
It'll
so
tell
Cypress
you right
comes with that. Yeah. So that documentation is there.
So you get all of that intelligence.
So it's a magic string.
And there's a ton of them too. So
see, that's what I'm looking for. Because when you see string, you're like,
no. So that's exactly that. Like get in there and use Cypress, and you'll be blown away by the fact that they've got that covered. They got you right. It's awesome.
Yeah, there's a ton, but like the Chai docs are
extension you download though in order to have that.
That's WebStorm for you. Yeah,
it does in VS Code as well.
No, does it? I always try to poo-poo on VS Code anytime I can, but someone always comes back with it.
I hear you on that.
I'm an intelligent fanboy, so
hey, you got to stop. I've almost got Justin fully converted to VS Code.
Oh,
wait.
I do both.
I thought he was fully. I thought you had already. You're not on the train.
I'll use whatever. I'll use PHP Storm if I have to. I'm not like.
Listen, I got booed.
Champion of one or the other
on stream when I tried to Vim into a CS proj file.
Oh,
so, listen.
Oh, come on.
They were like, download Visual Studio, woman, and I was like, Vim.
We had a whole talk about that yesterday about like we're front-end developers. We like pretty UIs. Why would I want to force myself onto like this Vim thing? I can't imagine.
Move the cursor around.
Yeah, there's no way. There's no way.
Oh, what's Jeremy saying? I bet you could use a generic to generate the type assist.
He's looking at a potential wrapper to not use strings. To be able to get.
That's probably what Cypress framework's doing under the hood.
Yeah,
and that's why we get that, also, right? Yeah. It's a TypeScript thing.
I bet you, if I really had the time to do it, I could create some type of plugin for that. But
we get it. We get it. Yeah. We get it already from the TypeScript stuff,
right? Like I already get it.
Cypress has that, right?
Yeah.
How do I post? Oh, I need to sign in, to post or something, right? I was gonna post the repo.
Oh,
you can post it in private chat.
Okay.
So if anybody wants to pull that down and play with it, Murat's actually another Cypress ambassador. He's a React guy, but he was maintaining a playground for Angular React, and I think maybe there's Vue in there too. But he gave me the Angular one to mess with, and it's actually you can play with it. It's like a Tour of Heroes setup.
Yeah,
and it's not like the exact Tour of Heroes, but there are a ton of comparisons between Jasmine and Jest. As well as Cypress, you can see the differences in the exact same tests and just the amount of difference. I put a bunch of documentation so you can see each set has a setup for how you can go through and write these tests or see how to make the changes. And you can actually do this yourself in your projects.
That is awesome.
Do you have a demo of doing that, like when your component is not a standalone and needs to have other ng module stuff, or maybe your component is in an ng module?
I mean, I don't, but I can add
more things.
Yeah, so I just why would I write a module based component in 2022? I just can't. I can't do it in my own project. That would be crazy.
I love that answer, but I do have a valid reason.
Let's hear it.
My client project is currently on Angular 11.
Yeah, that is a valid reason.
Woof.
That is a valid reason.
For now, I'll add it for now.
Yeah, get on that. I mean, as soon as you can get to 14, that is a game changer. They say that when I went to NXConf, they told me that NX was the most revolutionary thing to development since IDEs, I guess.
Since Justin.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
That's a bold statement. I agree. I don't know where he's going with that.
But I have to say that standalone components was a game changer to Angular. It just made the development so much more streamlined. And you got to get on it, guys. Got to get on it. Watch that episode that you guys did last 2 weeks ago on standalone components. Yeah.
I'm like adding you. I've got a post that I'm writing for V15. And I like list all of Mike. I like list your Twitter, what is it called, chain, for looking for like repos that have standalones. So I'm adding yours to the list of resources as people venture into that world. I know there's quite a few people who like wouldn't do it in 14, but now that it's like officially released and out of preview in 15, they're like, okay, let's play with it. So I'm excited.
The only knock I've heard on standalone components so far is like, well, why do I have to put standalone true in my metadata? Well, can't Angular just figure that out for us?
Property.
Yeah, right. I'm like, that's a cool knock to have, I guess, but I'm still gonna do it anyway.
I've had this conversation with people on the Angular team, and they validated it for me. So
they did. Okay.
So were you one of the ones knocking that?
No, I wouldn't say knocking, but maybe questioning. But
okay,
it's an easy flag to be able to determine that something is standalone. Sure, you could go off of the presence of imports. However, if you're not importing anything, how do you know? So
no, that's fair.
Also, if by chance sometime in the future, this is hypothetical, that if standalone becomes the default, it's easily removable.
That's actually a spoiler from what I've heard.
What?
I'm speculating.
Yeah, that's a spoiler from what I've heard. So
yeah, you think it'll be the default?
It's not a thing.
That way?
It's not a thing.
There's a lot of
in your heart.
I'm very skeptical about that with all of the existing Angular art out in the world. That would be a very large change.
It would be.
It would be. Well, I mean, because the schematic could take care of it, right? But like, I don't know.
You can still have support for module based. It's just a matter of why do we need to maintain two separate documentations for standalone and module?
You could always bootstrap. They could put it in the bootstrap where you could override it. So go to default true, and then in the bootstrap you have a way to opt out of that, and then keep your existing projects running, but still ship the platform as default true.
Yeah.
Do you guys know when the party is? There's like a release party today. Did I miss it? Was it earlier?
Oh, you didn't get the invite? You missed it? We just had it before this. No.
Hashtag Cool Kid Club.
There were cupcakes. Oh my gosh. Right? Virtual cupcakes. NFTs. I don't know. It's crazy. But,
let's see. It's at 12 p.m. PST. I don't know what time that is. Okay.
That's in 2 hours.
Okay.
It's interesting to start thinking about having this coverage, right? But then how does you start getting into Storybook, right? And you use Storybook for individual components as well, and working components in isolation. One of the things we do a lot with Cypress, and I encourage a lot, is when you have your integration testing and the testing of your functionality of your application, right? And you write those tests, and let's say you're doing stubbing of endpoints, right? So you can confirm that you're testing your application and there's no other variance in terms of dealing with the network being down or any of that sort of stuff, right? Or microservices or backend being down. You have this opportunity now that use Cypress as your development tool to not be blocked, and you can simply go into your tests. And especially when you get into situations where your feature is 8 steps long, right? And it involves filling out your customer information and address and credit card. And you're I need to test step 7, but I don't want to manually type all that stuff in and then have hot module reloading, my browser refresh every time I make a code change. You can leverage Cypress to do that dev work, right? You can put @focus on your tests. You can comment out the other ones and have Cypress be the runner of the browser. and have a pretty fast development experience for working that stuff. So I think as I see like component testing, right? And Storybook provides that ability to do isolation of your components, so you can do that development and speed that way. But now if I have Cypress coverage for my components, I could also use that. So it'll be interesting to unfold like how, where do those fit, and do we find ourselves like maybe having Storybook being baseline of showing the component, and then Cypress really becomes like the scenario coverage, where you say this component can do 7 different ways, right? So the Cypress coverage defines all that and confirms that's working, sort of thing. Because like right now in Storybook, do a lot of like stage that component and then stage it in all the different scenarios. So if it has one great example I actually use is does your component, if it displays that full name of the user, does my name fit in it, right? Schwarzenberger at the end. And so is your component ready to support a longer string? A lot of times we may not think that. So having a scenario mocked up in Storybook that shows it with a longer string versus a shorter.
Right.
But now I think about like, does that go to my Cypress component coverage to say, hey, the functionality of that component should, have this test coverage versus a, demo, which Storybook kind of is.
Yeah, I think to add to that is that it's very easy to break a Storybook test and no one knows because not everyone pulls it down. And so it's just like, well, now I have to go and fix the entire story for that particular thing. And I don't want to do that. I just want to write code. And yeah,
it's great. Yeah. And with the testing, you have the test runner, you could do it on PRs and things. And so now you get instant confirmation that it broke, versus Storybook is like hey, somebody go run it and see if it's working in the browser, right? Yeah.
I think Alyssa's going to be a late adopter.
I mean, it does sound nice, honestly, because Justin, there's so many use cases for Storybook where I was like, oh, we didn't even go there mentally.
No, we're starting with testing for you, Alyssa. We need to get that.
No, but Alyssa, like,
paired with Storybook though, it sounds like a useful. Like, I'm like, okay, that I could get into, because then it's just such a big world, It's like entering .NET. Like, where do you even get started? It's what testing feels like. So.
But it's that protection and that safety, right? Like, whatever domain you're in, like if you're talking about UI, right, and you talk about accessibility, and you talk about things like HTML5 and semantic elements, and the Q talked about it with the header element, and you're like, hey, I put this DOM together for a reason, because I have intent. I want to make sure that somebody 3 months from now doesn't come in there and change that to a div and divs all of the things, right? So you can write coverage for that. So then you're like, I don't have to go look at what they do. The test will tell them they're doing it in a way that's not intended. So you can protect, right? Just think about what you want to protect.
Like protection of like, the sanctity of your code and how the intention that was built in. But also Q mentioned something that really got me, which was accessibility, because I will oftentimes then open up things myself and I'm manually testing it with screen readers, or like even things like, is the contrast good enough? Right. Things like that. I think could be automated and should be. So
there's accessibility tests that you can integrate with Cypress, so that you can write that sort of stuff in Cypress and confirm.
Yeah, you can actually plug in a side dot. You can set whatever WCAG level you want. So if you're targeting AA standard, you can just plug that in. It'll test it for you as part of your component.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that.
I almost got a vibe from Justin as he was talking about this, that Justin wants a function. Yeah, that he wants to be able to put some sort of notification system on top of the test that basically says, if somebody breaks this test, I want an email to know who broke my code.
I gotta say, like, people break tests a lot, and that's the whole point of tests. I do not want to get notified. I already get notified enough that I'm like, what are you doing?
Imagine your inbox, you like wake up to like these, so broke this test, so broke this.
Every day.
Oh, that'd be fun. That would be funny. I personally think that would be a really good April Fool's to build something like that in, where just like all company tests that are broken go to Justin's inbox. Oh, this has been amazing, Q. I really, really love this.
This was
actually at the top of the hour,
really
but I still wanted to get to picks. So I didn't know if do you have anything that you want to highlight outside of what you've already talked about today?
Oh man. Can I be the lame and just be like Angular 15 or?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I love it.
But specifically, the whole directive composition thing, because that's going to be a game changer. Are y'all doing an episode on that?
We need to. I need to find either a good guest or write a good demo so that we can talk about it. But I think that was, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but like, wasn't that like one of the big issues that people were flagging whenever standalone was brought up? Of like, how are you going to handle this? And so then now it's thought of and planned out, and like, look at this, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, are we all happy with it? I was looking at it; it looks solid. I don't know. I'm like, I think that's a good solution, right?
Well, if you aren't, don't answer that. We'll answer it during our episode.
That's true. That's true.
You gotta do that marketing thing, right?
Yeah, the marketing thing.
Soon.
I love it.
I will talk about standalone. I'm okay to share my opinion. I'm a big fan. I'm actually looking at doing some work with standalone to try and get it easier to be able to create standalone applications. We can do all the individual pieces now, components, pipes, directives, what have you, but not an entire application. So, Alyssa, if you'll share the link that I shared in private chat, or actually, I guess that's you, Justin.
But not an entire application. Now I'm interested.
I know. I'm pretending.
So that you have no. Hold on. So as of right now, you'll end up with an app module. So you'll still have a module in place.
You have to have one module. You can't get rid of every module, right?
I thought you could bootstrap from an app.
You can bootstrap a component and therefore have no ng modules at all in your application. But there are no schematics. There are no schematics to do that. So
interesting. Okay.
So
you have to write it by hand? Oh no.
No. Well, right now, yes.
I don't know where you're going with that. I mean, I want a schematic, but like I'm capable of writing it without a schematic.
Yeah. So the tweet is so there's going to be some interesting concepts of what are best practices as you're trying to write an application that is standalone. So that's a call for information. If you have a repo with maybe some good practices or anything you'd like to point out as I embark on this journey, then that will help share some information there.
That repo I shared doesn't have a module in it. So if you want to look at that.
It does or does not?
Does not.
Okay. Yeah, I have an example as well, but I'm interested to see structures for testing and routing and HTTP, all those things.
Yeah, the routing is the important bit. I saw some like app.routes files that you can provide to your app component that you're bootstrapping, and it's just a huge list of routes that point to different components, and it's different. But I feel like that's going to probably not be the pattern, but I do want to try that out.
I dig it.
Excellent. Well, V15 is your pick. Mike, what's your pick? What do you got? You got anything?
No, that was my pick. Was the
that was your pick? That Twitter, Twitter chain? Are they
tweet
chain
conversation? Sure.
There's
a lot of replies. So
yeah. And Justin, what do you got? Any juicy bits for today?
Yeah, man, I was thinking about that. I don't know. I'm gonna go with the Andor series, the Star Wars series Andor. It's a really, really, really slow burn. I have a love-hate relationship with it. It's great. And like, I love the content. I love where it's going, but it drives me insane from an episodic type of scenario. Like, I feel like I watch an episode and I really don't walk away with any talking points or any excitement to like, you left me hanging. I can't wait till the next week. I'm just mad that like it ended, but then I'm happy that the content was there. So it's like, and last episode was really good too. So I don't know. That's my pick. Take it or leave it.
Is the season over right now?
I think I don't actually know how many total episodes there are. It was 11 so far. I'm guessing it's probably 12. So it's probably one more. So
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, my pick is very similar to the first two. It's just the YouTube link to the watch party. That's in 2 hours. Thanks for doing that math, Justin. That time math for me.
It's easy when you said Pacific time because that's my time. So then I can do that.
That's your time.
Alexa,
otherwise, I'm hitting Google.
Are you drinking ketchup?
This is my water bottle that my sister got me. And this is a TikToker who rolls. It's called, this personally says the D20 sauce roll, because he rolls for sandwiches and like he always uses a D20 on the sauce roll, and that's the one that makes or breaks the sandwich, because as you can imagine, you're like rolling for every ingredient.
Are you a
Some of them are
tabletopper?
pretty- Oh, I love
yeah.
D&D, but I'm also like into like D&D TikTok, and this guy like with the sandwich.
Interesting.
I see your games actually in the background. Is that
Oh yeah, I'm
okay?
there's some Pathfinder books at the very top. They're kind of blurred out.
Oh
but-
my
wait,
God,
hang on.
yes.
That's them.
It's all blurred. So
Yeah,
like
there.
clicky games or clicky games. You know, I didn't want to assume.
Yeah, that's probably 50 or so, but I have over 210 board games or so. 212, I think.
We need to talk, because I need to find. We are getting to the point where it's just disgusting. Our organization is lacking, and the display looks bad. I need a clean way to like game.
No, you don't want to see my display. It's there's more games on the floor down there that you can kind of see. I'm out of space. I got to find somewhere to put those things at.
Well, chat was saying what an amazing presenter you are, and
Whoa.
that they were really impressed too. So
That's really
thank
cool.
you for
Well,
coming on and
thank
sharing
you, everyone.
your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it, man.
For sure. Maybe you guys can get me back on to talk about outputs at some point.
Please,
I would
please,
love
please.
that.
Let's do it.
We will be scheduling it. It will be scheduled. I
right.
love to see your solution and your reasons. I want to hear it all. So I'm excited
Cool.
for that. But thank you, Q.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime.
I
We'll see you, everybody.
think that's a wrap. Thanks, everybody.